Ah, James, how could you just leave me hanging like that? Um, Showing us how you would go into section C, but at least you did show us how you were going to do that, and so nicely done. I have to say that at least my concern about emotional and timbral progressions helping to support the meaning of the music, right? Helping to elevate it. That's all fantastic. Okay, so let's take a look at this score. And starting off, I must say that I really love your use here of oboe and English horn in octaves. It's very successful, and also flute and English horn in octaves would have also worked really well in a different sense, right? It's interesting how the oboe will bring out the oboeness of the English horn, and flute will bring out a different quality of the English horn, something that is compatible with the flute timbre, but only if the flute is in a stronger register, right? So this is strong enough, I would say, the upper middle register and upwards. Of course, you can push this combination lower of the English horn working with the flutes lower and lower, just so long as the English horn is so long as the dynamic is really soft, right? Okay, but this all works fine, of course. All double reed opening, and yet it sounds very elegant, and I really love the overlap, right? So we have like three different types of transitions between instruments sharing melodies and harmonic material in terms of continuity, right? So there is the trade-off where one melody stops and the next one starts, right? And then there's the dovetail where they are exchanging the roles on a single note, and then there is the overlap where an element of the harmony or melody continues on, and then the next part of it steps on its toes. So this is a beautiful use of overlap, and of course, like the at least right here with these two sounding E's being taken up by the first and second flute, and despite me being a little scolding about the use of the second flute in a lower context, here it's perfectly fine because there's nothing to compete with it. Right, the harp is just actually bringing it out rather than stepping on it and making it inaudible. And of course, it's a beautiful contrast between all double reeds and the whole single reed plus flute kind of a sound, which has a more of a square wave sound, right? And nice management of dynamics. Really, no complaints here. Of course, coming in the middle of everybody else's hairpin, you would be mezzo piano, and then here you've marked crescendo to mezzo forte for the benefit of the Sibelius playback, and then here you have just not even bothered mentioning that you're coming back to piano. But here I would mention it for the second voice instrument, right? Because I mean it's a given piano. Then here you have diminuendo, but see, like ending with the diminuendo, you would also have to mark piano here because like piano we diminuendo to something, and then what's next here, right? Are we pianissimo? What's the player to think, right? So I would say add piano here, and then you don't really need to end the second voice with it, but end the first voice with it on top, but the second voice on the bottom definitely give us that destination dynamic. Okay, so there's this trade-off happens twice, and nicely handled with the bass clarinet coming in and playing that sort of suspended note from beneath. Now, my one possible caution here is that here you do have a trade-off, right? So you are trading off directly from flute to violins, right? Muted violins. So that really does feel a little unnatural, right? It sort of feels like one doesn't follow the other. Couldn't there have been another overlap, right? As we mentioned before, the difference between overlap and dovetail. Couldn't there have been another overlap right in here, right? With even the strings coming in a little early, maybe at pianissimo or triple P, and then crescendo to piano, and that way just having the string sound emerge out of the clarinets and flutes, right? Then I think that the transition between the two very different colors would be much more natural. Because like right in here, it's beautifully, it just feels exactly right, right? But here, the difference between the colors is just it's okay. So here's the thing. All right. So it's not that there is anything wrong with the way that you scored this at all, James. It's more that you have set up the expectation of the colors to follow each other seamlessly, and here we have a seam, right? And then no more seams. So how do we mend that seam right in here? And that would be my suggestion, is to have this continue on for a full three beats, and have the strings come in a little early, very, very softly, pushing into their phrase. Right now, with all of that, with all of my praise, there is the problem, as you may have heard me, complain about, scold about in other entries, of just basically transcribing the piano phrasing onto the strings and winds, right, without any regard for issues like repeated notes, right? So I would say that would need to be fixed. And the thing about it is, like, some of this advice that I'm giving you has the added connotation that I feel that this interpretation of it is something that you should try to get performed, okay? And I'm very excited about it. I'm very happy about it. I think that there is a lot to say about it that's really great, and might be an inviting piece to perform for an orchestra that but you need to fix things like this, slur over repeated notes, right? What does that mean? Right? Now, usually when there is a slur over a repeated note, there is an effect that is intended, like some kind of portato, where the articulation comes from the gut, right? And there are a couple of other types of things that could possibly be meant in context. But in this case, I just feel that it is just you basically just dropped the piano phrasing onto the wind. So that's, I'm not really seeing any deeper meaning in it than that. So if that is the case, especially since there are some instruments that are not getting that phrasing, I feel that you should rework that, okay? All right, I'm not going to go into it over and over again. All right, but I feel that this is all very strong right in here, and I love the just like the added glitter of the harp. I think that you should roll like. I think both hands should roll. I don't think that you should have roll in one hand and not in the other. That will get a raised hand at the rehearsal. The harpist will say, "Look, do you want me to roll across both hands, or do you want to roll in both hands at the same time, or do you want like not a roll in one hand and a roll in the other? In which case, you should have said non arpeggiando above the right hand or something, right? So your marking here is unclear. I would say roll in both hands." Or tell, if you really want that effect of arpeggiando in only where specified, then you need to mark it. Say non-arp, RH, right? Just to be absolutely perfectly clear. Okay, so muted strings, all good. You're setting things up, and now on our next page. Yeah, so you have parentheses muted, right? And then you have other instruments without mutes, and that is also sort of in, some in parentheses, some not. Almost, it would almost be worth it to have violin solo and viola solo on the first page as well, just to mark it out, and that also in the part, right? So that tells the copyist to put that in the part, and then there will be somebody just holding back, like, the concertmaster will hold back, and the principal violist will hold back on thinking that they have to join in at the beginning, and then it won't be such a big sudden hassle. Oh yeah, right, okay, I have to take my mute off and so on. Not that that would really necessarily be an issue in a concert performance. However, if this piece were to be read, just like it was a reading, it was a recording session that was just under huge pressure, and the musicians were going to sight read it on the day, right? That's when those kinds of issues of absolute precision come into play, right? Just really making sure. So I'm not a huge stickler on that, but I do think that it's good to try to work out some of those problems. Okay, I mean, not to the point of like thinking that your piece is worthless or whatever if it's not, but. Okay, so right in here we have this lovely combination, solo violin, solo viola, and then behind those, right, just sitting in the background behind those instruments are the first flute and first clarinet. And then like added harmonic elements in the horns, right? Pianissimo, you're really keeping everything soft. There's no need to submerge the horn any farther back in the texture. I think it's all fine, okay? Now, what I would take issue with is something that you're hearing in the mock-up, all right? Which is potentially true, not necessarily always true, but you've set yourself a problem here, okay? And that is that what you're hearing in the mock-up is that it's very hard to make out the figuration in the non-muted instruments, right? So that the reason why is because of these horns and the other harmonic elements around the other instruments, right? Their radiance is enough to interfere with the clarity of the muted instrument. So how do you get around that, right? And what I would do is introduce a kind of a surging dynamic, right? So that would be enough, just to add some nuance here in the middle, to push into this and come back out, and it wouldn't do anything bad to your solo instruments. In fact, they could also surge a little, right? So that could come out a little bit in each of these 2-bar phrases. And that would be the simplest way of solving that and preserving your idea. All right, so aside from all that, there's like nothing else to say because it all works great. Right? So there's, I'm not here to rip this piece apart, but just to see what are the ways of improving it. All right, so here is, so here we're seeing rolls in both hands, right? And not on the previous page. So that was just a careless omission on page 1. All right, this is all really cool. So I feel that right in here, the slurring is, you're breaking up the slurring, which is good, but it's a little fussy. Do you know what I mean? Like, and the giving the different roles to the different, dividing them up. I don't think that's necessary. Just have everybody in the first violins play this. I see what you're trying to do here, which is to keep the voices from becoming overwhelming, to keep too many strings on the same voice at the same time so that it's all balanced divisi across the entire orchestra. I don't feel that that's necessary right here. And I think the other thing is that the players are going to have the instinct to want to bow together, right? So this kind of stuff is going to be probably just all crossed off by your concertmaster and the section principals, and they're going to just reinterpret what you want here. So right in here, you know, surging towards a crescendo, right? Ending with mezzo forte. I think that the players would want shorter bow strokes, right? So I mean, so here it would be better at pianissimo to have longer bow strokes over everything, and then here to have shorter bow strokes, right? Because the louder, the stronger the push on a bowed phrase, the shorter that it needs to be, right? So, but it's not to say that any of this is impossible. It's just doesn't really all sync together, you know. I mean, yeah, there is a line of thought of like, oh, just leave it to the string players, and what I would say in response to that is that's fine if that works in the situation that the particular person who said that, you know, like the way that they work with their string players. If that works for them, that's great. I see phrasing in string slurring as being a fine art that should just constantly be worked on by the orchestrator. That you learn how to use the slurring in strings as a tool for your own, for your expression, right? That can be a key part of your approach as an orchestrator. So, that is the reason why I feel that that's so important. All right. So I would say shorter bow strokes here probably are better. And then also, this slurring across the downbeat is that's a remnant left over from the piano phrasing, as are these really long slurs. I mean, they work fine in the winds and brass, but they're, for the strings, like you're giving up a degree of nuance, right? A degree of control. The longer the bow stroke, the more that it all sort of has to be this sort of smooth thing, and it doesn't really, the ability to just really push on certain notes and you just sort of give all that up with very long bow strokes. All right. So anyway, sorry, I'm obsessing over this. And then here we have repeated notes under a bow stroke, right? So what does that mean? So and repeated tonguing under one breath. So just think about all of those things. Those are just things that you can edit and fix and so on. They're not huge crises that, I like this trading off here between the two rolls, just kind of giving your horns a break. It's not really necessary, right? But I see that, like you're saying, like you want muted horns here and you want unmuted horns there, and then you're sort of giving your other players a chance to kind of get their mutes off. You know what? It would be better. It would be just for this little bit right in here to stay with the third and fourth, right? Just have them continue on in that role, and they'll be the most secure. You can fit the whole poco a poco crescendo into one thing, and then you can have your first and second horn come in here, and then reapportion the roles, right? So, you could either have this. You could have one of these voices be second horn, but I actually see with the mathematics that it really works out better if this is third horn and ending up being the upper middle voice. So I mean, there isn't a need to, but that would be, by moving this around, you give yourself more options. Okay, and then here's that lovely the second part where you bring in soft heavy brass and so on. Soft heavy brass. Yeah. Yeah, it's, I think that this is all going to work though. Like, I'm sort of picking apart really small things like dynamics and instrument rolls and slurring and everything else. But more or less it works. You get to a certain point with this, and then like say cold tutti and so on, but still without a mute. I don't think that's necessary to say. That's But I mean, okay, fine. You might as well. And I think that it all comes together really nicely. So now we're getting into these soaring clarinet lines. A little touch of support here from bassoon to kind of firm up everything together, and then of course the cellos doubling the bassoons, and then yeah, it's just so nicely scored right in here. Yeah, and then just a touch of viola. So you're giving your violist time to take their mute off. That's definitely enough time for the lower divisi violist to do that. Yep. Yeah. So once again, I feel that everything here is fine. I mean, mezzo forte horns you may find still is too strong, right? Because in those mezzo dynamics, I think it's still better to kind of keep to the whole, brass 1 degree lower, even with horns, which are a gentler instrument. So this may feel that it blots out some of the subtlety of the wind and string combination above. And then here, dropping to mezzo piano, that implies that there should be, right, you see you've got this diminuendo here in the timpani that should go across all of the brass, I feel. So it sort of eases off into this. And I would even add that to the strings, so that this comes right in mezzo piano, dolce, tenuto. You don't need to write in tenuto physically. Just as text, just give us the articulation. That's enough for the player. Okay. So this is all really cool. So we're coming back to simpler textures, simpler approaches, and I feel that this all works really, really great. And once again, we're having variations of texture, and that makes the score strong as well. Yeah, and you're giving yourself, you're sort of easing out of the mutes, just very subtly and kind of effortlessly ending up without mutes. That's nicely done. Violas and bass clarinet is a beautiful combination, and of course bassoon and violas. And this is a nice radiant, nice radiant texture here. And then piccolo is just completely left out of it. I think that's important. And then here, like the answering of the first and second violins coming in with that harmony from above. And then you have like the continuation of the sort of trading off between bass clarinet and bassoons, and you're keeping the variance up here, right? Bass clarinet at the beginning and then at the end, right? And then, of course, like the bass clarinet taking on different roles and not just playing one particular role. That's all very strong, and I really love the use of the underpinning second bassoon here, along with the double bass. Really nicely done. Okay, and horns. Right, so piano dolce diminuendo. So two separate markings. I would say right in the hairpin. there's a lot of text in the like text dynamics in the original piano score, and maybe that should be one of my next 12 more common scoring errors. I feel that it's better, like the players in the orchestra need target dynamics, they need hairpins, right? It would have been better for you just to write in, I see the grayscale text here. It's basically telling the MIDI playback to go down to pianissimo. It would be better just to get rid of the diminuendo here and then just put in the hairpin and the destination dynamic of pianissimo, right? Because who's to say what this means without it, right? Mezzo piano, dolce, diminuendo. The player might say, "Oh, well, you just want me to get a little softer in this bar," right? It doesn't say poco a poco diminuendo or anything like that, right? So it doesn't really mean what these hairpins are saying it means. So just try to be a lot more specific in that. And then watch out for things like, hang on, I'm just going to jump back for a minute, and I'll come right back to this page in a second. Watch out for things like this. Poco a poco crescendo, big chunk of rests, and then another. So, it would be better just to have a hairpin here, and then a hairpin here, right? So it's just the crescendo and the poco a poco crescendo. It just makes things less clear, not more clear. Yeah, just use the hairpins. They're really great. Okay. So, and then like bringing the harp back in when the winds come back in, that's also very strong. And then they become a feature of the accompaniment of the violin solo, right? And this is all completely workable right in here. This sort of rising. What I would say about it is that by having a rest right in here, like there's a break in the continuity, right? I feel that it would be perfectly fine if the violin solo started a few notes earlier and seemed to emerge out of the violas, right? And then continued on. And then also, just because this is as smooth as silk doesn't mean that your violin soloist is a wind player, right? As in with this flute. Give them, like, especially if you're going to have a nuanced part, give them shorter bows so that they can push in more and so on. They have more control over what they're playing. Now, having said that, it's perfectly fine. This will work, but it's just the player has less control. I would just break it up, slur over each half, or slur into the crescendo and then out of the crescendo. But just really, you've got these long slurs. They just feel exported from the piano part. So just tutti divisi 3. Yeah, that's all fine. And then you have you're going from winds to strings, pushing up into this, and then to strings trading off to winds, pushing up into and once again I felt that there was a break in the continuity of the line. So the flute could start a little bit earlier playing off the clarinet and then emerging out of it, and then I think that the sense of this rising line would be better. Now, having said that, there is a problem with all of these rising lines, and that is that they are handoffs, right? Or trade-offs. Maybe handoff is a better term rather than trade-off. So this player is sort of handing off to the next one and handing off. So it's not dovetailing. I feel that dovetailing would be a much stronger option. So just have each new voice start one note earlier, dovetailing with the previous, and then you would get a seamless sense of continuity across the entire picture. And of course, maybe even having the violin solo and the flute solo starting a couple of pitches earlier, just emerging out of the sort of the rising line. And then I think it just would be much more smooth, because the risk that you're running here is yada da 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 da. Just like each one that comes in is starting anew, and it's adding a thing, and instead of this sort of you know what I mean? You're losing that sort of smooth as peanut butter kind of crunchy peanut butter, right? That smooth peanut butter feeling of spreading it across one big slice of bread. All right, so before the metaphors make me want to go eat breakfast, let's get back to the wrapping up. And this is all fine. I'm finding that the wrap ups in these for the end of rehearsal B are really nice. Yeah, like almost nobody is creating much of an issue. Yeah, and then this. So all right, so you're pushing into this and then suddenly dropping off. So I feel maybe it would be good to sort of fade out just really quickly as the first violins continue on their merry way. But one way or another, the release has got to feel kind of natural, almost like taking a breath. I love the way that you monkeyed around here with the exact meaning of allargando assai and poco più a tempo. I think this is one of the most effective that I've seen. The management of the tempo right in here. It's really nice. And then of course when I got to this and I heard this, I was just thinking, James, you betrayed me by stopping right there and, not going up to dotted semibrev and finishing, the next section. But, that's all right. I won't be greedy. I will just appreciate what you sent me as just excellent, excellent work. And, just like I said before, see if you can get this performed. Right? It is filled with beautiful ideas, but think about fixing things the way that I did. Think about maybe not crossing the downbeat so much, right? Especially if other instruments are going pa pa, ta ta, then da blah. I mean, try to match up on your articulation patterns. I think it just is stronger. Anyway, but having said all that, I will just stop now because I think I've given you enough advice. It's like this piece this orchestration did not really require a huge amount of advice. I think it's fairly nicely done. Maybe you could have like more like taking away phrase like slurring in the winds and the strings and adding it to the harp, right? The harp needs more guidance in terms of what kind of phrasing you intend for it, right? That does help. Some people might say, well, it doesn't matter at all because the harp is just basically a sustained instrument. But I think that the flow of the ideas is something that's important to them in a way that we don't usually understand, even as pianists and and guitarists possibly. So anyhow, with that, I will just stop now and thank you, James, for such an excellent score and a great way to start my evaluations for this next day in our marathon. And thank everybody for coming this far along this journey. I'm noticing that the comments are starting to fade off a little bit in these semi-brev evaluations, and of course, like a lot of this is happening during the weekday, people have less of a chance to catch up on their viewing and so on. People have got day jobs and night jobs sometimes, so I'm not being too harsh in my judgment. But if even just all of the semi-brev participants, right, like you, James, and everybody else in this category, were to comment on each other's scores, that would help keep the energy going. And it would really, really be great as just a kind of a normal thing. If all the minimum participants had a chance to comment on each other's scores, and then all the semi-brev and so on and so forth, it would just really continue this sort of ferment of people exchanging ideas and information and inspiration that I feel is just really at the heart of this and what makes it worth it for me. Okay? So please, everybody, keep the observations and the views and everything else going, because the new scores that are coming up are deserve just as much attention and love as the first ones that I released. Okay, So thanks everybody. Thank you to my Patreon subscribers, for supporters, for helping keep the channel going. And of course, as I mentioned before, a portion of the proceeds for these 2 months are going to be going to help Ukrainian musicians. I'll have a video on that coming up within a week or two. And anyways, that's all I've got to say, except I'm hoping that you'll join me in the next video coming up in a few hours. Thanks everybody. I'll see you really soon.